Welcome y'all, Wes DIY Food Plot Pro. Thanks for joining us. We're standing out in an ag cornfield that will soon be shelled, and I'm going to share some tips with you on some wheat, how to plant that, when to plant that for best results. And I'm also going to share with you a tip about managing wheat next spring that very few people know, that is extremely crucial step in putting wheat into your process. You have to know that, or you're going to set yourself up for failure for next year. Let's get started with this. Many of us hunt ag type environments where you've got standing corn here. This will be run through with the combine here sometime in the next few weeks. We're looking at adding something to this already highly attractive plot. Corn is going to be great pull all fall and winter long, as many of us know who hunt harvested cornfields. Whitetails will pile into a harvested cornfield, especially right after it's done, but that will continue until there's no grains really left out here. One thing we can do to spice up a cornfield is to add some winter greens to it. And by winter greens, I'm talking about winter wheat. Winter wheat is easy to grow, it's cheap, it requires no equipment, and it's something that can really help your harvested cornfields to attract more whitetails, to hold more whitetails, and to increase your odds at killing that mature buck. First off, you need to get with the farmer and make certain that he's not going to plant wheat out here to begin with. I know this one is not. This will be down in the bottoms. They never plant wheat on this farm. So what I'm going to do when he gets done, there's 2 or 3 different ways that we can do this. Go in and sow this right before a big rain at a rate of anywhere between 50 and 100 pounds per acre, and just sow it on top of the ground before a good rain. Wheat is not real finicky about coming up. A lot of times if you can get it in before a rain, you can throw it on top of the ground. It'll sprout, no trouble. 2 best ways to do it are either to drill it, and at drilling it, we're looking at that 50 to 60 pounds per acre rate is a good rate for us on food plots. But we can drill it, or we can disc the corn stalks. Lightly. You don't have to sit there and work this into a powder. Just run over them once or twice, knock them down, expose some soil, sow your seed, run the disc back over them. 1/2 inch depth is what we're looking for when we're planting wheat. Those are the best ways to do it. If you're going to sow it on top of the ground, I want you to push that rate just a little bit higher, up towards that 100 pounds per acre. You won't get quite as good of a germ as you would if you were drilling or if you were disking. The most important thing with a winter wheat cereal grain crop is timing. If you plant this stuff too early, you're gonna have wheat that's this tall this fall, and that's no good for your whitetails. They're not gonna eat that. They like young, tender growth. That's why we see when we plant these brassicas, when we plant these clovers, alfalfas, corn, soybeans, the list goes on and on. As soon as we plant those, the deer just absolutely murder them, right? They just absolutely hammer them for the first 2 or 3 weeks, because whitetails love young, tender growth. If we plant wheat too soon, we're going to get into that wheat gets way too big. So when is the perfect date to plant that winter wheat? I always like to shoot for about your first frost date. Wheat will continue growing through the winter as the temperatures increase for it to do so. Winter wheat is something you don't need to be planting that in 1st of September when your first frost is first part of November. That's a no-go. Your wheat's going to be gigantic, and it's not going to be attracted to your white. What we're all looking for as food plotters, when we're planting these cereal grains, we're wanting 4 to 6 inches of growth. So that's all we're looking for. We don't need anything 18 inches, 2 foot tall. We want young, tender growth from the timeline that we're going to be in there. My first frost date is going to be around sometime mid to late October. So that's when I'm going to plant. I am planning on coming in about the 15th, 20th, somewhere in there of October, and I'll plant this wheat. It won't take wheat long to germ. As soon as you get a rain on it, it's going to be going. And as soon as you do, the deer are going to start utilizing it. You get into a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day between wheat, oats, and cereal rye. They're all good. They all have different things that they're good at. The one thing that's really important that most folks don't know about winter wheat and all these cereal grains in general is the following spring, you have to have a management role in killing this stuff off. Why? Because the issue with cereal grains is if you're planting something behind it that is like soybeans, that's a legume, you don't really have anything to worry about. But let's say that you were planting a plot and you planted in wheat this fall and you're going to plant it with corn next spring. You plant your winter wheat, then all of a sudden it gets about waist high next spring before you kind of get the urge to go in there and start food plotting. Then you go in there and spray it. You plant your corn with a no-till planter. And all of a sudden your corn's up and it's yellow, it's crap, and you're like, what in the world's going on here? Cereal grains require nitrogen to break down to decay. So what happens is all the nitrogen that's in that soil goes to those plants that are breaking down, therefore leaving your corn plants deficient in nitrogen. This is why you see this often in fields that had wheat, oats, cereal rye, that get no-tilled into, they start showing nitrogen deficiencies throughout the year because it takes it forever to break down. So that's one thing that's really, really important for us to note, that it does require nitrogen to break those plants down, to decay that plant matter. And while it's doing that, that's where your nitrogen's going. It's not going to, say, your corn crop. It's not a gigantic deal, but it's something that we need to be able to pay attention to, that we need to learn from, that we need to recognize that, okay, next spring, I want to go ahead and feed my whitetails into the spring, but when spring green up gets here and the wheat's a foot tall, I need to be getting out there and I need to be burning that stuff down. That way your nitrogen is not tied up as much as what it would be if your wheat got 3 feet tall and then you went in and killed it down. If you're planting something like legumes, it does not make any difference because they make their own nitrogen. They don't need the nitrogen, okay? So they're gonna be able to make their own, they're fine. Soybeans, lab, clover, anything like that, it's gonna make its own nitrogen. You have nothing to worry about. Any crops that require nitrogen, that is going to be where you're going to start showing nitrogen deficiency. I've got a field that I did this last year. I planted my buck forage oats on, and I let them get a little taller than what I meant to this spring. Just didn't have time to get down there and spray them. And I did have nitrogen deficiencies show up in that food plot later on. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. Smash that like and subscribe button if you hadn't already.